evening and welcome to the 2012 presidential debate sponsored by the Commission of Presidential Debates. I'm Kelly Kapowski. The subject for tonight is tax cuts for the wealthy. I will divide the next 8 minutes into 4 segments and candidates will have 1 minute to respond. Now let us welcome presidential candidates Violet Ann Bickerstaff and Jesse Spano. We all know that Bush-era tax cuts were extended from 2010 to 2012. The end of 2012 is quickly approaching, and tax cuts for the wealthy is a hot topic on the Hill as well as water coolers around the nation. We already know where both parties stand, and now that we've stated the topic of the debate, let's hear what both candidates have to say on this issue. Senator Bickerstaff, what is your view on extending the tax cuts?
Tax cuts for the wealthy are detrimental to the American economy. We are currently recovering from a series of recessions and continue to increase the federal deficit at an exponential rate. If we wish to boost economic activity and reduce this deficit, the tax cuts for the wealthy must be eliminated from the tax code.
I believe that while we've been in a period of economic recession, these tax cuts have allowed those with more wealth to help re-strengthen our economy by investing in small businesses that might have otherwise not gotten off the ground, since banks are now hesitant to give loans to them. These tax cuts help keep the rest of America running.
Now that our candidates have had ample time to respond, I will open the floor for questions from the news outlets. CBS News, what is your question for the candidates?
Good evening. I am A.C. Slater reporting for CBS News. Do you believe the tax cuts for the wealthy are detrimental to our deficit?
Well, Mr. Slater, I do believe tax cuts for the wealthy are detrimental to our federal deficit. Historically, any time there have been tax cuts for the wealthy coupled with increases in defense spending, a deficit has resulted. We saw this in the 1980s as well as the 2000s. The Central Budget Office estimates that extending Bush-era tax cuts will increase the deficit by $1.2 trillion over the next 5 years. This is no surprise considering the tax cuts will cause an estimated revenue loss of $1.1 trillion during the same period. If we wish to significantly reduce our country's deficit and get back on a healthy fiscal track, we simply cannot continue to give the rich tax breaks.
All of us are aware that our country is falling further into a hole and we are digging it ourselves. This hole is our deficit. The solutions many have proposed are in favor of cutting spending or raising taxes. But what it always comes down to for the latter is whose taxes should we raise. Most people immediately point the finger at the wealthy, saying that taxing them more will decrease our deficit. While this is logically true, they are already shouldering the burden of paying over 50% of all federal taxes, and when it comes to the federal income tax, they are paying more than 70%. Who are we to ask them to pay more than when they are already paying so much?
Thank you. Now we will take a question from CNN.
Hi, I'm Tori Scott with CNN News. Do you believe that under the current tax provisions, all Americans are paying their fair share on earned income?
One of my biggest issues with tax cuts for the wealthy is that they undermine the income equality and tax fairness that our progressive tax system is meant to provide. Under our country's progressive tax system, the more income you earn, the higher your tax rate. In this way, high-income taxpayers pay the same proportion of tax on total earned income as low-income taxpayers do. When you add tax cuts for the wealthy into this equation, the picture becomes somewhat different. Under the Bush-era tax cuts, the wealthiest Americans pay the majority of their federal income tax at the 15% capital gain rate. This essentially lowers the proportion of taxes that wealthy Americans pay and shifts the tax burden to the middle class. If we wish to restore fairness to our system of taxation, we must eliminate tax cuts for the rich.
I believe that, as the law now stands, people are paying their fair share of taxes. As I mentioned in my last response, the amount the wealthy pay in income taxes contributes to over 70% of the overall amount collected in federal income taxes. On average, households that make over $1 million a year will pay 29.1% of their income in federal taxes. The IRS also estimates that there are about 237,000 returns that show a household earning over $1 million. If you do the math, that adds up to about $68 billion in revenue. That's a significant amount of money. It may not be such a dent in our deficit, but how is it fair for us to ask them to be the only ones trying to make a dent in our deficit? The simple answer is that it's not fair to ask that of them.
Thank you for your responses. Our final question will come from Fox News.
Good evening, I'm Lisa Turtle reporting for Fox News. My question is whether or not you believe the tax cuts have been successful.
I do not believe the tax cuts have been successful. One of our nation's biggest goals right now is to recover after a period of hard-hitting recessions. The tax breaks for the wealthy are hindering this economic recovery. We all know that customer spending fuels a large part of our nation's economy. Data from Moody's Analytics shows the tax cuts for the wealthy do little to increase spending. In fact, tax cuts for the wealthy are more closely tied to the saving rate. When tax rates are raised, the saving rate decreases. When tax rates are lowered, the saving rate increases. Under the current tax provisions, this means that the wealthy are saving their money rather than spending it. This is why I believe tax cuts for the wealthy are unsuccessful.
Success is defined in many ways. While the tax cuts may not have immediately aided the middle and low income households, the tax cuts have allowed the more wealthy to give back in other ways. With extra money at their disposal, these wealthier taxpayers have contributed not only to the expansion of small businesses, but to our minds and bodies as well. These people are the reason we have museums, theaters, and amazing universities. They also contribute large sums of money to fighting diseases like cancer and AIDS. Without the money that generous benefactors bestow upon these various pillars of our country, they would still exist and still receive funding. However, they would not get nearly as much. That wing at your school that just became built because someone donated $30 million, not there. The X-ray machine or stereotactic treatment machine that could have helped detect or help someone with cancer, not there. Success isn't just lowering a deficit. Success is helping the people behind the deficit in ways that taxes would not.
I would like to thank the candidates for taking time out of their busy campaign schedules to participate in this short yet crucial debate. It has been very informative to their constituents. Senators Bickerstaff and Spano, best of luck to the both of you.